Hi, my name is Ben Miller, and I'm a physical therapist here at Total Physical Therapy in Amarillo. And today we're going to continue our installment on running research, where we take a look at different research articles and apply them to our lives as runners. Today we are going to address the question of what risk factors are associated with Achilles tendinopathy. So what things lead to Achilles tendinopathy and what things could actually maybe help prevent Achilles tendinopathy. And so Achilles tendon health is pivotal for us as runners because we use it a lot when we run. In fact, over 50% of our running force comes from the tendon. As we land on our foot, elastic energy is stored up through the tendon, and then as we go through our gait cycle and toe off, it is then returned to the ground. And it's been shown that 50% of our push-off comes from the tendon itself. Overuse of this tendon is pretty common, and it's tended to be regarded as a multi-factorial disease, meaning that sometimes there's maybe one thing that can cause Achilles tendinopathy, but most of the time it's a combination of different factors working together that causes the tissue degeneration. And so it's imperative as us as runners to try to figure out, what things can I do to help reduce those risk factors and help keep my tendon healthy. And so to help us address this question today, we're going to look at a systematic review. The name of the systematic review is Achilles Tendon Injury Risk Factors Associated with Running. And as with systematic reviews, this review looks at a bunch of different articles and tries to combine the common themes within those articles to determine conclusions based on those common themes. So this systematic review includes 15 different studies looking at different risk factors. And the conclusions that they drew from it were that there were 5 variables that directly link to Achilles tendinopathy. There are 4 protective, and then 1 that actually looks at it causing Achilles tendinopathy. So the 4 protective is number 1, high peak vertical ground force. So if you are able to generate a lot of force into the ground that makes you go up, that tends to be protective. Number 2 is greater arch height. Number 3 is running on stiffer surfaces, and then number 4 is peak propulsion force. So how much force can you put into the ground behind you to make you go forward? And then there was 1 variable that led to a greater risk of injury, and that was high brake forces. And so if you want to think about what a brake force is, any force that is put behind your center of mass propulses you forward. It's going to push off the ground to make you or your center of mass move forward. Anything that is pushed directly down into the ground will make you go up. And then anything that pushes in front of the ground will actually make you slow down. We call that a braking force. And so there are some people that run with a high braking force, or whenever they land their foot, it lands way out in front of the center of mass and actually causes them to slow down. Those are the 5 different variables that directly link to Achilles tendinopathy. Within this article, though, there's a number of different factors that are listed that just didn't have enough statistical power to be able to be included into their conclusions. But the authors of the study did say that you should look at all these factors and try to see if you have any of them and go ahead and try to reduce them, since we know that Achilles tendinopathy is multifactorial and a bunch of different things can contribute. And so let's take a look at a couple of these. All right, let's look at training factors. So number 1 is distance run. So how far you're running plays a small effect on your Achilles tendinopathy. The longer you run, the more stress you place through your Achilles. And so you should try to make sure that whenever you're training, you're not going long just to go long, that you're doing it with a purpose and a training purpose in mind, not just to go out and run really long periods of time. Number 2, and this one's actually I see quite a bit, is running training paces that are too close to your race paces. For example, your race pace is 8 minutes a mile, your training pace is 8:30 minutes a mile. And the study showed that if your racing paces are pretty close to your training paces and you don't have a good amount of variety between them, for example, 8-minute pace for your racing pace, and then maybe your easy days you're running like 11-minute pace. If you don't have that variability in there, typically those types of runners have Achilles tendinopathy a little bit more often than people who have the variety of training paces. Number 3 is Softer surfaces actually have a negative effect on the Achilles tendinopathy. And this one kind of surprised me a little bit because typically, and I've had Achilles tendinitis before, and I think, Achilles tendinopathy, I should, reduce the amount of force through the tendon. I'll go run on softer surfaces. And so it would be interesting to see a few more studies done on this particular subject. But they found that runners who ran on softer surfaces typically had Achilles tendinopathies a little bit more than people who ran on asphalt or road. And they theorized that this could be the case because whenever we run, we actually adjust the amount of leg stiffness depending on what surface we run on. So if I go out and run on a soft surface, and in order for me to maintain my same running pattern and gait, I actually have to stiffen my legs up because the ground isn't as stiff. And so because my legs stiffen up, that causes more tension to go through the Achilles tendon. And so that was their theory. And I've seen a study or two that looked at that idea as well. But I would just like to see maybe a couple more studies done on this subject. Let's look at static alignment. So having high arches was good. So if you're wondering what arches are, if we take a look at our foot, the arch is going to be on the inside part of the foot. The higher that arch is, typically the better it is for the Achilles tendon. And then the lower the arch, typically it's not as good for the Achilles tendon. And then let's look at strengthening. So it was unclear on whether if you had good calf strength, if that determines if you're going to get Achilles tendinopathy or not. But if we look at the rehab of Achilles tendinopathy, one of the more popular rehab tools to treat it are eccentric calf raises. And so that's where you start up on the toes and you slowly lower down. And if we increase our eccentric strength of our calf musculature, typically that will help with your Achilles tendinopathy. And so they theorize that maybe if we worked on our strength, particularly eccentric strength, that it can sometimes help prevent the Achilles tendinopathy. Pronation of the foot had a very unclear negative effect. So pronation, we've talked about this one before a little bit, but as you come down and your foot hits the ground, pronation is where you're coming in and that arch flattens before you come and roll off the toe. And so it's been shown to have a very small negative effect, and it could possibly lead to Achilles tendinopathy, but it also may not. Braking forces, again, we talked about this. High braking forces are linked with increased risks. And so they suggested that if you do have high braking forces, or if you're unsure if you have high braking forces, to go ahead and get somebody to look at your running and determine how far are you landing in front of your center of mass and what ways you could try to fix that. So those are the different factors associated with Achilles tendinopathy. If you guys liked this research study, go ahead and put a like down in the bottom below. If you guys have any comments or questions, go ahead and put those in the comments below. And again, if you guys have any ideas for any future studies to look at, just put those in the comments below too, and I'll be sure to look at them. All right, you guys have a great day.